What is slack space? Any space left over between the last byte of the file and the first byte of the next cluster. It is also referred to as file slack. How files are stored. Files are stored in clusters. A cluster is 8 sectors and 4096 bytes. If a file is 5 bytes, there are 4091 bytes that are not being used. That's a lot of wasted space. Deleting files. What happens when files are deleted off the hard drive? Are they really gone? In most cases, they are stored in the recycle bin. Unerased files. Slack space can contain deleted files. These files can be retrieved using several different programs such as File Recover or Windows Undelete software. Windows Undelete software is the leading software for file recovery. Overwriting files. PC users need to consider erasing all files when getting rid of a PC. Files can be removed using Window Washer. Even after transferring all files and overwriting all files, there are still some programs that can pull up files that have been overwritten. Thank you.
Digital evidence recovery is the new DNA. People think they deleted it, it's gone, and it's not. No one ever thought to analyze computers until the last decade or so. We physically remove the hard drive. Our software will allow us to pull up that deleted information. And then we actually sit down and have to go through it file by file. There's just all kinds of information. People just don't think about what they're doing when they're using a computer. You learn a lot about a person, who they email, financial information, their love life. You name it, it's there. I don't know if you need to get into the mindset, but I think you develop an idea of what they're like by seeing what's on their computer, and boom, you got them just like that. I just work the case and find the necessary information, and it all comes together in the big picture to put the people away. We know what we're doing is the right thing, and we know that in the end, the victim's glad we did it.
Ashraf bin Azmi, and I'm going to talk about deleting a file in Windows, the process of it. So, when you send a file to the recycle bin, nothing actually is being deleted. It's still there, but physically not where you found it first. So, this pointer now shows the file is in the recycle bin. Taking the removal one step further, you can achieve permanently deleting the file by pressing Shift, Delete, and it will permanently delete the file from the recycle bin. The physical space it occupies on the hard disk is now free and ready to be used for a different objective. It is not immediately overwritten. This is just by design. That was in the file, so Windows will no longer know the physical location of the file for a different purpose. That is how the process of deleting a file in Windows. So I will be giving this floor to my next friend.
Assalamualaikum and hi, I am Ibrahim Kabramayu. Today I'm going to talk about how to recover zip files.
Used Disk Drill before, you don't know where to start, this is the video for you. So, I've got an SD card right here. If I plug it in, you can see that what happens is I can't use it with Windows unless I format it, which essentially means the file system of the drive is corrupted. And as you can see here, if I go into my Windows Explorer, I cannot find the card anywhere. This is a common problem, especially for media professionals and people that work with lots of external drives, as things tend to get corrupted, and well, the usual solution is to format your drive, which poses an obvious problem because you'll lose everything on the drive if you do that. But with Disk Drill 4, we can recover all the data off the drive so we can still use the drive, and we'll save all of our data without formatting. Sounds pretty good to me, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and open up Disk Drill, and it opens right away to the data recovery panel, as you can see in the top left here. Now, if you're not familiar, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the UI. So in the middle here, we have all the drives that are connected to the computer. So you've got hardware disks, logical volumes, and everything else. On the left here, we have our extra features like our data protection tab, along with all of our recent sessions, which if you've never used Disk Drill before, this will be empty. And then on the right, you'll notice that if I select a drive, it gives you all of the metadata about the drive, along with a button to start the data recovery process itself. So, of course, if you have not plugged in your drive yet, go ahead and do so now. As I said, I'm using an SD card, but this will work with any drive at all. Then once it registers in your PC, it will show up in the list in Disk Drill 4. So go ahead and select it. Now, one thing that I should mention real quick before we move forward is you'll have better luck scanning an entire drive selected from the hardware disks list as opposed to a directory or a logical volume within that drive. I've made an entire guide post about it that you can go read if you want more information, but it's better to scan an entire drive as opposed to individual logical volumes on that drive, just to let you know. So with our drive selected, go to the right and choose the recovery method. So in the drop-down menu, there's lots to choose from. There's quick scan, deep scan, and a few others, but we're going to leave it on all recovery methods. This will give us the most redundancy as well as the best results. Now finally go ahead and click search for lost data. Alright, so during the scan, you'll see a progress bar here, along with some icons to let you know how the scan is actually doing. So of course, the amount of time this will take depends on the size of the drive as well as the amount of files that have been lost. And after each scanning method is complete, you'll actually see a report of what has already been found. So you can see here that we've got a bunch of pictures, some videos, and things like that are already showing up with a little subscript number that actually shows the amount of those particular kinds of files that have been found on the drive. And plus, you can actually review all these files in between each scanning method, which is pretty cool. But we're just going to go ahead and wait for the entire scan to finish. And upon full completion, you'll see a total number of files as well as the size of all those files put together will be displayed on the screen. And at this point, you can either view or recover all the files in the top right here. I'm going to actually review the items first just so I can show you how to navigate. So we'll just click Review Items. Now, one thing I should mention real quick is that to know if a file can be recoverable or not, it must be viewable in the preview window. So if I highlight it, and you can see that here, you can see that you can actually see the preview of the file in the thumbnail window right here. Another way you can do this is actually switching to the thumbnails view, which will give you obviously little thumbnails of each file, and that'll just give you a better idea of which are intact and which are able to be recovered. So there are two ways of navigating all of the files and folders that have been recovered. You have a file structure right in the middle here, which is very similar to a Windows Explorer window. And then on the left here, you also have essentially just a big group of categories. So you have pictures, videos, documents, etc. And these can be browsed individually. Like say you lost a bunch of pictures. Well, you don't really want to scan through all of the documents and things that were found that aren't pictures. So you can go through all of your individual photos or videos and all of those different categories on the left here. Additionally, if you know the name of the item that you're looking for, you can use the search bar in the top right to actually search for the name. Now, just keep in mind that if it doesn't come up in the search, that doesn't mean that it wasn't recovered. Sometimes metadata like names and file sizes can actually be lost in the corruption or recovery process. So if it's not found through a search, don't worry, it could still be there. This is just a way to find it faster if the name does happen to be intact. Now you can also filter through the files by the time it was deleted as well as the size. However, be aware that some files may not adhere to the filter due to, again, loss of metadata in the event of a formatted disk or a similar situation. But you can go in here and say filter it out, like deleted within the last week here, which is just a way to kind of say like, okay, I know the file was deleted within the last 7 days, so I can go in here and change that, and that will show me all the files that were deleted within the last 7 days if that metadata still exists on the drive. So that's pretty cool. Alright, now to actually recover the files, you have two options. So you can recover them all with just this button down here, or you can recover specific files. Recovering all is very simple. You just press the button at the bottom. If you're going to be recovering a specific file or group of files, then you just go and find the files you want and then put a check mark next to the ones that you are wanting to recover. But I'm just going to recover the entire disk just to show you the real power of this here. So I'm just going to leave everything unchecked and click recover. And it will ask you to choose a save location. So I'm just going to choose my desktop, which is what I typically do just for ease of use, and click OK. Okay, now once the recovery process is done, you'll get a confirmation, and if you navigate to your save location, which is my desktop, you'll find a folder, and inside that folder you have all of your files. As you can see, they're just as they were presented within DiskDrill. You can go in and view them just as you would normally in Windows Explorer. And that's it. So now what we can do is we can go back to DiskDrill and either return to the disk list or press back to review the recovered files again, just in case you missed something. And when you go back to the disk list, you'll actually notice that a new session has been created with the name of your drive, and clicking it will actually allow you to continue that session at a later date if you so choose. So that's pretty cool as well. But that is it for today's video. Hopefully you guys found this informative and helpful. If you do have more questions or issues, please do not hesitate to reach out to our help desk. We're always trying to improve the software every day as much as we can for you guys. But that is it for this video. Thank you for watching.
Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and morning. So my name is Muhammad Fidin bin Muhammad Sidin. So today I will present to you. I will explain to you about unallocated space. So what is unallocated space? Okay, unallocated space is also known as free space. So it's a free space that OS can write to. So if OS writes a file to a drive, that part of drive is now allocated, so it's not called unallocated anymore. So what happens if you delete the file? As example, a movie file. So when a file is deleted, in our eyes, the file seem to be missing, and it cannot be searched throughout the computer. However, the data of the movie is still on the hard drive. So it just changed status. So in other words, unallocated space contains data from all the files that have been deleted but not yet overwritten. So now you know how the unallocated space works. So if the file that has been deleted and the metadata of the file is scattered and the file does not recognize what type of file it was from, how do we get the file type? So this is where data covering slides in. So what is data covering? Data covering is a subset of file covering. It is a forensic technique of reassembling files from raw data fragment when there is no file system metadata. It is common procedure when performing data recovery after a storage device failure, for instance. So in order to perform data covering, we need special tools such as Scalpel and Phobos. So let's go meet our friends, Mr. YouTube, to better understanding how to do the data covering. Let's go.
We're going to take a look at data carving. Now, data carving is something that's really important to do as part of a forensic investigation. There are a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons, of course, is because you can't always guarantee when files have been deleted or moved around on the file system. So it's really useful to go digging around amongst the bits and bytes on the drive and be able to locate the remnants of files that haven't been completely written over. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to jump over to my S drive and then cd cfdi 320. So I'm in the cfdi 320 directory there. Now, data carving is definitely something you can do manually. You can certainly go use tools like grep or some other tools that will allow you to search through a disk image and be able to locate the bytes and strings that are signatures for particular file types. This can be incredibly tedious. This is definitely one place where I do recommend some automated help. Now, I'm not always enormously fond of automated tools, particularly if you're not really sure what's going on under the hood, if you're not really familiar with all of the concepts so that you can somehow verify what's going on. I'm not always enormously fond of automated tools, but this is one that can be so tedious to do manually that it is definitely useful to have a tool that will do it automatically for you. And Scalpel happens to be one of those. This is an open source tool, and you can just run Scalpel and you can see how simple it is to run it. The thing about Scalpel is it comes with a configuration file, and let's just take a quick look at that. I'm going to go over to my S drive here and then CFDI 320 again. And here's the configuration file. So I'm going to open this up using WordPad, or let's just use Notepad. It's a little bit easier. Actually, let's use WordPad and see if it will fix those line breaks for us. So here we've got this in WordPad, and the line breaks have been fixed. And you can see this is a pretty detailed configuration file, but what it really comes down to is determining which file types that you actually want to go looking for. So you can comment some out, you can include some of them. Most of the good ones are actually included here. I'm just going to leave this as it is. You can certainly go edit the configuration file if you want to either leave some of the file types out or not leave them out. Some of them are really good at creating false positives, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm just going to leave the configuration file as it is, mostly for demonstration purposes. So we're just going to run ext against Scalpel against my ext sample disk image, and this is going to go extract all of the files that it finds. So let me just open this back up again. And what we should have gotten was a directory called Scalpel output, and sure enough, we did. And what we've got is a set of JPEGs here, in this case, that it has carved out. And it looks like it didn't quite put it together quite right, because what it's assuming, for the most part, is that all of the blocks are contiguous. So the images that you get back aren't always going to be perfect, but you can get a pretty good sample of images that have existed on the disk at one point or another. So looks like we've got a pretty good sample of images on this particular drive, and you did see some other file types. Looks like it found some tar gzip files and then a zip file as well. Of course, there's an audit log for the specifics around what it located in the configuration file that was used in that particular run of Scalpel. So Scalpel, again, you would use it for data carving. It's actually a really good program to use. As you can see, it actually does a pretty good job of pulling all of the files that you actually need out of a particular image without a lot of muss and fuss and configuration settings. It just goes through and locates them from the raw bits and bytes on the disk.
In this video, I'm going to discuss the file carving tool Foremost. Like we've discussed in other modules, oftentimes when a file is deleted, the actual data contents are not overwritten, but rather the location in memory or the location on disk where this file was stored is simply marked as unallocated. That way the file system knows that if it needs space, this is available, but until the file system actually needs the space, the data still remains there. So there are different ways where we can actually recover this information because it still remains on the disk. So one method we use is called file carving. In file carving, what we do is basically scan the drive looking for specific signatures indicating that there's certain files there. Many different file formats have a specific signature or data structures which indicate that a file is of a specific format. So for example, a JPEG file will have a specific header. The header will start with a specific signature, a byte string, and it will actually also end with a specific byte string in the footer, which will indicate that this is a JPEG file. So for recovery purposes with file carving, what we can simply do is scan the drive and look for these signatures. So the tool we're going to use today to do this is called Foremost. And like I said, it's a file carving tool. It's similar to Scalpel, for which you've already written a module, but I think it's a little more user-friendly, so I want to discuss it here. It also recovers a whole bunch of built-in formats, which makes it a little easier to use. So what I've done for this tutorial is I've gone ahead and made a folder with a bunch of different file types. We have a JPEG, we have a PDF, a docx, which I can open here. You see it just as a simple file. And then I also have a zip file, which basically is just a file, a folder containing the other three files, the docx, the PDF, and the JPEG. What I've gone ahead and done is I actually took this folder, put it on a flash drive, and then I I actually deleted the files from this folder from the flash drive and used DD to make an image of that drive. We've already discussed DD in other tutorials, so if you're interested in that tool, you'd have to look there. But basically what it does is just makes a byte-by-byte copy of the drive. So again, I deleted the files from the drive, and then I made from my flash drive, and then I made a copy of it. And then we're going to use Foremost to actually recover them using file carving. So quickly to show you what I was talking about before, where file formats have specific header information. So for example, JPEGs have a specific signature, or they have a couple of possibilities, but basically a JPEG file will always start with a specific string. So what we can do to actually see this string is if we use the tool called hex dump, which will actually give us a dump of the low-level bytes of the file, and we hex dump the penguins file, type it to less so we can see it, you'll see that it actually starts, and of course we have to account for endianness here, but it starts with the string with the bytes in hex FFD8 FFE00010. That is the signature that signals that this is a JPEG file. There's also a signature in the footer at the end. There's another possibility for a JPEG file, another signature. But what we can do is, if we're using file carving, is just scan the drive looking for the signature, and then we know we found the JPEG file. So before we run Foremost, what I want to show you is just how it works. So if we do a man on Foremost, you'll see that you can use Foremost to use to recover some built-in formats. Built-in formats include things like JPEGs, PDFs. OLE is actually the file format for the newer versions of Office, so the newer DocX files or PPTX, and XLSX for Excel. It also recovers exe files, zip files, and finally there's an all option, which is actually the default. And the all will just say, try to recover all built-in options, all built-in formats. And that's what we're going to use. We're going to try to recover all the built-in formats, because if you remember, we had a zip, a docx, a PDF, and a JPEG. Now just to discuss, when we run Foremost, we're going to use some options, and I just want to explain what they are. The options we're going to use is the -v, which is verbose mode, which will just give us some more information when we're, while it's processing, it'll just tell us what it's doing. We use the -T for timestamp the output directory. That way we'll know exactly when this output directory was made. We'll use the -I, which specifies the input file, which of course would be our Foremost demo. And finally we'll use -O to specify the output directory we want to run it to. We want to save the output to. I should know that this directory must either be empty or non-existent. If it exists and contains data, Foremost will not work. I also want to mention quickly that a lot of these things by default will run, so actually we could just simply execute Foremost space Foremost demo, and that will actually give us a default option of recover all built-in formats and save the output to a file called, I believe, output in the current directory. The last thing I want to discuss here quickly is that we have a configuration file which we can specify. That's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here. I'll get into a little bit at the end, but basically the configuration file is used for non-built-in formats. So say I want to recover a file of a format that's not one of the built-in ones like we discussed before. So there's actually a configuration file where I can specify the header and the footer to look for, and then Foremost will try to find that in the drive. We'll get back to that a little later. For now, let's run Foremost. And again, like I said, this is I deleted the files on this drive before making a copy of it. We're going to run Foremost, and like I said, the verbose option, timestamp the output directory, -O we'll call ours demo out. That's the output, and -I is going to be the image, which of course is Foremost. And I am in the wrong directory. Let's just change this. And again, -I specifies the file we want to run it on, and then we execute it. And you see, because we're using verbose, it gives us some more information here. Like the command, we actually executed our output directory configuration file, which we don't really care about because it's built in, but Foremost cares about it a little bit. And you can see that so far it's found, scroll up a little bit, just finished. So it found a JPEG here, that's the file 0, It found the docx here. You'll notice it has a lot of weird stuff because of the docx file format. It found the zip, and it found the PDF. You'll also notice that actually when it gives us a total, it says that 2 of the files found were zips. That's actually because docx is actually stored as a zip file. The docx file format is actually really a zip file. You can actually unzip the docx file. And now it's done, and you can see that it's saved to our desktop, the output here. And if we open it, you see we have these 4. For example, the JPEG contains our penguins. The docx we can open, and we'll see that it's got the same information that the original docx had. And hopefully it will actually open. This is taking way longer. There it is. And finally, if we want to look at the zip file, you can see that the zip file contains the same 3 files we started with. So clearly Foremost can be used to go through the drive and recover stuff. The last thing I want to show you quickly is just how the configuration file works. I'm not really going to discuss it so much, but so you have a general idea in case you want to use it. It's generally stored in /etc. And then if we can do a less on foremost.conf, you'll see that it's got a whole bunch. This is the Foremost configuration file. It's got a whole bunch of instructions on how you have to specify the entries. And if you scroll down, you can read all this. You'll see a whole bunch of examples, including some that are already used by Foremost. For example, here's the JPEG one, and like I said before, the header is FFD8 FFE00010, which specifies a JPEG. If you are going to use the configuration file, again, you'll read some of those instructions at the top to learn how to specify the header and the footer and what this other information means. You'll also notice that this configuration file provided, you can make your own configuration file, or you could use this one that they provided. You'll notice that it includes some built-in file formats and some non-built-in file formats. So theoretically, if you wanted to recover ART, I guess art files, you would just uncomment this this line here, and you'd be able to find those. And obviously, there's a whole bunch, and you can add your own if necessary. And there's a whole bunch of different formats here. We're not going to go through all of them. That's about it. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you learned something, and you can use Foremost to recover some files. And if you want to try this out, I'm going to include this image file so that you can try this out on your own. I'm going to include it in the module, and there's a couple of challenges using some other images that you can check out on your own. So thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful, and have a good night.